Don't try to pretend like, hey, if I just ignore this, it's going to go away. That's not what happens. If you don't answer their questions, someone else will. You might think it goes away, but they just stopped asking you. Hey guys, I'm Bill Westers, and this is the Encountering Truth podcast. Welcome to the Encountering Truth podcast, where we examine the evidence for Christianity, engage culture with kindness and conviction, and encounter Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. Well, happy Thanksgiving. This is Thanksgiving week coming up here, and we have so much to be grateful here at Encountering Truth. I know I do, my family does, and I'm sure you do as well. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to share a quote with you from G.K. Chesterton. It's really appropriate for an apologetics podcast. And so G.K. Chesterton says, "The worst moment for an atheist is when he is really thankful and has no one to thank." In all reality, I mean, it is the case. It is a solid case for Christianity, is that when we have a desire to be thankful, thankfulness and gratitude is always directed to a person. So the worst moment for an atheist is when he is really thankful and has no one to thank. Well, this is going to be a very important episode, especially for anyone and everyone who cares about the next generation. See, this is actually a special episode geared directly, specifically for Christian parents. And I don't usually speak directly to parents, but if I'm honest, this is actually parenting the next generation, parenting my own kids is one of the things that really got me into apologetics big time in the first place, because there was a bit of a crisis in our own family with my own kids. I won't go into it too much, but we could see how this world was affecting my kids and how it was pulling them away from Christ. And so I felt an intense calling to do something about it, that I had to research, I had to get into stuff, I had to learn stuff. How do I approach this? How do I parent in this crisis, in this day and age? And it took a lot of effort on my part, but I dove in, and that's really what a big part of why I got into all of this in the first place, because I cared about my kids and I wanted them to know Jesus and to continue to follow Jesus. And so there's a lot of parenting books out there, a lot of things, podcasts that you could listen to about parenting. And they'll tell you what to do to raise your kids in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And that is all extremely important. But what do you do when your kids have questions or doubts about their faith, about Christianity? In this episode, I'm going to give you 5 don'ts for when it comes to talking to your kids about their questions and doubts. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. When your kid comes to you with questions or doubts about Christianity, about their faith, about who Jesus is, about God himself, if they come to you and they express these concerns and these doubts and questions, number 1, don't freak out. If your kid comes to you with doubts or questions, the last thing that you want to do is freak out. What? How can you ask those types of questions? That's, you don't want to act scared. You don't want to have a big reaction. Okay? You want your kids to know that they can actually come to you without you overreacting about something, about their question. It might just be a simple little thing, but then again, it might be a huge thing. But you don't want to overact. They want to know that you are a safe person to talk to. And if you freak out, that will do the opposite of what you want it to do. It'll push them away. It will make them want to go elsewhere because, hey, if I ask dad, if I ask mom these questions, they're going to freak out and they're going, to make such a big deal about this when I just want to know about this one question. And so instead of asking them, I'm going to go to Google, I'm going to go to my friends or wherever else they can find. And so if we freak out, we're going to push them to other sources of quote unquote truth. Now, depending on the question or topic, like I said, you might actually be freaking out on the inside. But you need to do whatever you can to hold that together, hold it in, hold it together, and not let them see that. You can freak out later. You can go to God about it later, talk to your spouse about it later, but do your best to not overreact, to not freak out. You want to be that person that they feel safe going to with those questions and doubts. And if they don't feel like they can come to you, they will find their answers elsewhere. So along with that, don't shame them. And one of the worst things that we could do if they come along is to freak out and shame them. Oh, you know better than that. You should be ashamed of doubting that. You know Jesus loves you. You know God is real. You know the Bible is true. Shame on you for doubting. No, we never want to shame our kids for the doubts. And a lot of this stuff, remember that this is specifically geared towards kids and parenting. But this is overall. This applies to anybody, your neighbor that comes to you, your friends' kids that come to you, your brother or sister, family member, friend that you know. These are all good things, ways to approach even them. Now, we're trying to gear it specifically to kids, but I think this applies to a lot of other situations. So don't freak out. Don't shame them. John Stonestreet and Brett Kunkle wrote a book together called A Practical Guide to Culture. And in there they say that we must never give our kids the impression that questioning is doubting or that doubting is sinning. And then to quote Sean McDowell and J. Warner Wallace in their book, So the Next Generation Will Know, they say that, doubt is not necessarily destructive to faith. Unexpressed doubt is. We need to encourage students to express doubts and ask questions, but assure them we still love them and will help them find answers. So, number one, don't freak out. Don't shame them. Number two, don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss their questions. Don't just try to sweep them under the rug. Don't try to pretend like, hey, if I just ignore this, it's going to go away. That's not what happens. If you don't answer their questions, someone else will. You might think it goes away, but they just stopped asking you. They found someone else to ask or someone else to listen to. So it doesn't just go away. There's plenty of TikTokers and YouTubers that will be happy to answer those questions for them. They would love to tell your kids what to think. But you want your kids to come to you with their questions, not go to Google, not go to TikTok or YouTube. You want them to come to you to find truth. And so don't dismiss their questions with some just easy thing. Well, you just have to just believe. Okay? I think of so many times when I was young, I remember hearing people say something to the lines of, well, the Bible says it, I believe it, and that settles it. That's true. Okay? That's great. The Bible says it, I believe it, and that settles it. But when you try to use that to answer a kid's question, you're really not taking them seriously. The Bible, we believe, we know that it's the inerrant word of God. But they need to know that we have good reason to believe that the Bible is true. God never calls us to just blind faith. Remember that even Jesus used evidence in convincing proofs. In Acts 1 verse 3, It says, after his suffering, he presented himself to them and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. And then with John the Baptist in Luke chapter 7, verse 20 to 22, John the Baptist had sent his followers to Jesus to say, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" At that very time, Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the gospel." So Jesus didn't shame John the Baptist for doubting and having questions about, are you the one, or should we wait for someone else? He didn't shame Thomas for his doubts. He gave him evidence. With John the Baptist, he pointed him towards the evidence. Tell him what you have seen and heard. With Thomas, he presented him with the holes to put his fingers in, the evidence that it was truly him. So remember that doubt is not the opposite of faith. Unbelief is. So doubt is not sin. Questioning is not sin. We cannot shame our kids for having questions and doubts. And we cannot just dismiss those questions and doubts and say it's not a big deal. We have to take it seriously. Our kids need us to take it seriously. They want us to take it seriously. And if we don't, again, they will go find someone that will. So number 1, don't freak out. Number 2, don't dismiss it. Number 3, don't oversimplify it. Don't answer questions that your kids are not asking. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying don't offer them answers to questions, okay? I'm not saying, to not go into detail on other things. I'm saying that we need to offer the right answers, honest answers. And when they present us with a question, we can't oversimplify it into something that they're not actually asking and just try to answer that. That's what would be called a straw man fallacy. This means to oversimplify or distort someone's argument and then refute that simpler distortion of the argument rather than the actual argument that the person is trying to make. It's like defeating Tim Barnett of the Red Pen Logic puts it this way: as defeating a defenseless imitation like the Scarecrow instead of the real thing. And so this happens to Christians all the time. Atheists a lot of times will take an argument that a Christian is making and they'll turn it into a straw man and then knock over the straw man when that's not really what we're arguing in the first place. For example, the Kalam cosmological argument that says everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. Well, atheists, a lot of times, they will take that and say, then who created God? And that's simply a straw man, because no respectable Christian actually believes that God came to exist. He did not begin to exist. He is eternal. And so they're taking this argument and saying everything that exists has a creator, but that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that everything that exists has a creator. We're saying everything that begins to exist has a cause. And so they create this straw man, pretending that we're saying that God, because God exists, that someone must have created him. Nobody's arguing that. That's a straw man, but it's easy to knock over. Well, who created God? Okay, and that's just one example. Okay, so we don't like it when atheists do that to us. Okay, that is not an appropriate way to refute someone's argument, to answer a question. And so we cannot do that with our kids either. We can't oversimplify something and then refute that oversimplified version of it and say, see, it's an easy question to answer. Ta-da, all done. Okay? Because again, they're going to come across other answers at some point in their life that may actually deal with the argument as it's supposed to, and they don't have that backing, that understanding to stand up against that. So, for example, one of the things that's come up lately in some circles that I've been in is the idea of things like evolution or the age of the earth. But evolution in particular, a lot of Christians will say, oh, you believe in evolution? That's so stupid. Or, they'll like kind of laugh at it and talk about it as being absurd. You think that we all came from apes? You think that we came from a monkey? Well, yeah, if we came from a monkey, then why are monkeys still around? Why are apes still around if that's where humans came from? If we evolved from a monkey or an ape, why do they still exist? But that's a straw man. And that's not fair to ask because nobody's actually saying that we came from apes. They're saying that we have a common ancestor, that humans evolved one way from that ancestor and then apes evolved another way from that ancestor. That's the argument that we have to refute. Now, there's plenty of things that we could talk about that actually do refute that. But if we just brush it off and say, you think that we descended from apes, then why are apes still around? And not actually deal with the real argument when they go to college or even sometimes in high school, this comes up and the real argument behind it, and they're going to feel lied to. They're going to feel like, why did my parents not tell me all of this? Is that the only answer that they had? Instead, we deal with it the way that it's presented, the real argument, not the straw man version. So you deal with the actual argument of evolution. And again, there's plenty of things that we could talk about, like irreducible complexity, or how we got life from non-life. We could talk about the age of the earth. Now, you can go into the difference between old earth creationism and young earth creationism, but we don't just deal with the straw man argument of it. We need to seriously consider, not oversimplify what these arguments are. So, again, number 1, don't freak out. Number 2, don't dismiss it. Number 3, don't oversimplify it. Number 4, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. Okay? Because you're not going to know all the answers, and that is okay. Okay? Nobody's asking you to know all the answers, right? But one of the worst things that you can do when you don't know an answer is just to make one up. Okay? We don't just make something up, because eventually it will come out and they will feel lied to. Like the evolution. If you just make something up or come up with some sort of oversimplified response, or a response that you don't really know, but you're just going to give something that you just pull out of thin air without any evidence, without any understanding, and you just kind of give some sort of half-hearted answer, eventually they're going to come across better arguments. And if you did not give them something that you truly believed, or you just made it up, they're going to feel like you didn't really know, or you lied to them. And neither one of those are good. But it's okay to say that you don't know. Just be honest, okay? Instead, just say, I don't know. And tell them that you don't know, but that, hey, I don't know the answer to that question, but tell you what, I will figure it out, and I'll get back to you on it. Or better yet, why don't you just sit down together and say, hey, why don't we figure this out together? Let's look some things up online. Let's read a book. Let's listen to this. Let's watch this video that we found. Take some time to figure it out together. Going back to John Stonestreet and Brett Kunkel's book, A Practical Guide to Culture, they said, in our experience, seekers become mockers if they're not allowed to wrestle with their doubts and questions. Parents may fear that they'll make it worse if they say the wrong thing, but it's far better to answer a question with, I really don't know, but let's work on finding an answer together, than to condemn a child for having sincere questions. Remember, in the information age, if we won't take our kids' questions seriously, others will. All right, again, so number 1, don't freak out. Number 2, don't dismiss it. Number 3, don't oversimplify it. Number 4, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. And finally, number 5, maybe the most important, don't be passive. Don't be passive about teaching your kids biblical truth. Be proactive. Okay? We need to actively teach our kids biblical truth, biblical answers that are not oversimplified or just dismissed as a just believe type of thing. We need to teach discernment. We need to teach our kids what a Christian worldview is, to be able to properly see the world through a Christian biblical lens. You know, what does it mean? Creation, fall, redemption, restoration. We have to teach that Christian worldview and how we can see everything in this world through that, and how Christianity is the best explanation for how things are. And if you don't disciple your kids, someone else will. Like we said, there's plenty of YouTubers and TikTokers and media out there that would be happy to tell your kids what to believe. So actively teach. Ask them questions. Let them get those tough questions from you first, rather than coming across it online or in their science or social studies class. You give them those questions in a controlled environment, because that's what we need to do. We can't control what our kids are going to come across. Okay? We can shelter for so long, but eventually they're going to go out into the real world and they're going to come across these things even before they're out of the house. Whether you homeschool or private school or what, they're going to come across these ideas. And so we need to let those tough questions come from us first. Inoculate your kids in that controlled environment. You're giving them those small doses so that you can help them through it. And we need to teach them discernment, to be able to look at the things in this world and recognize the truths and the falsehoods. So actively teach them, ask them questions, and build relationships. Truth presented in relationship is always going to be better than truth without it. And so when your kids feel safe to come to you, they know that they're not going to be shamed or dismissed, and that you'll be honest about whether you know something and you're not just going to oversimplify it. There's a relationship that's built there, and they feel like they can come to you more and more often. So have those conversations with them on a regular basis. You know, some of the things that you could do is have those conversations, whether you're driving somewhere in the car. You know, start asking them some questions. Hey guys, what do you think about this? You guys ever learned about evolution? What are your thoughts about that? And you can have a conversation about it. Maybe you watching a movie. You know, what worldview is being presented in the movie? Spot the lies. Pause the movie from time to time and see how bad your kids get mad at you. But at least you can say, hey, what idea are they communicating in this? And is that true? And you can have a conversation about it. And you can have these conversations around the dinner table or before bedtime. Kids love to have conversation before bedtime because it delays their bedtime, right? But take that time to build the relationships. They need to know that you're not going to shame them or freak out. They need to know that you're not going to just dismiss it as not a big deal and get ignored. They need to know that you're not going to oversimplify it, but that you will give an honest answer. And if you don't know, that you'll find out. But be proactive. Don't be passive. And don't make excuses. Okay? Along with this, it's just, sometimes as Christian parents, we think, we're so busy, or we might be like, well, I don't have time to read the books about that. I don't know where to look for it. I don't know how to answer these questions. What do I do? Sometimes people are like, well, I'm not smart enough, or I don't know how to do it. Well, if you care about this generation, you've got to take a step. Those things cannot hold you back. If you don't feel like you're quote unquote smart enough, if you don't feel like you know how to do it, well, nothing changes until something changes. And so you need to take those steps to figure the things out. Look stuff up. Ask people. Talk to people. Get advice. There's websites like gotquestions.org or crossexamine.org or standtoreason.str.org. You've got all these websites that can actually help you. Encountering Truth, I have links on my website to give you resources for podcasts, for books, for websites. Take advantage of those things. Don't shove the discipleship of your children off on someone else. Don't shove it off on the children's pastors or the youth pastors. They are not the ones. They should come alongside you, but you, as a parent, are the one that should be discipling your kid, that should be instilling a Christian worldview, that should be the one answering the questions and the one safe that they can go to that's not going to freak out and will give them an honest answer. So take the time, seek it out, learn, grow, read those books, listen to podcasts, go to those events and conferences, take time to study, and live out your faith in front of your kids. Look, I'm no expert at all this, okay? I'm figuring this out as I go, just as each one of you are. Children don't come with user manuals. Parenting doesn't come with instructions. We figure this out. None of us will do this perfectly. All we can do is our best. And look, at the end of the day, our kids, we can do our best. Our kids are their own people. Okay? They are individuals responsible to God for their own choices. And so even the best can make mistakes. Even the best have kids that are still going to walk away and have those doubts and those questions and that they don't feel are satisfactorily answered. But if we put in the effort to do our best, to learn and to grow and keep them before the Lord in prayer, then the rest is up to God and the choices that the kids make. So, I hope this was helpful for you. I hope that you got something out of this. I would love to hear from you. If you haven't done so already, remember to take some time to subscribe. And I would love for you guys to be able to leave us a good review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Give us a good rating and review there, wherever you listen. Because that really helps us to be able to reach more people and hopefully equip other parents and other Christians to be able to answer and make a defense for their faith. And make sure to share this episode. If you enjoyed it, share it with your friends, share it on social media, share it with your spouse, and then follow our Facebook page and visit the website, encounteringtruth.org. So, thank you again for listening. And remember, let's make it our goal to examine the evidence, engage culture, and encounter Jesus. God bless. We'll see you next time.